Lyra had been told many things about humans. Her teachers said they were weak. Her father, the High Admiral of the Dominion, called them a young and foolish species. The generals in her government laughed when humans were mentioned. Everyone agreed on one thing: humans were not important. Lyra believed all of this when she first came to the human colony world called New Haven. She was sent there as a cultural liaison, a fancy title that meant she had to watch the humans and report back to her government. It was considered a boring job. Nobody wanted it. Lyra took it because she was tired of her father's endless wars and politics. New Haven was a farming world. There were no great cities, no military bases, no important strategic value, just small towns surrounded by fields of grain and vegetables. The humans there lived simple lives. They woke up early, worked their land, and went asleep when the sun went down. Lyra thought she would hate it. She was wrong. She met Daniel Mercer on her third day on the planet. He was delivering vegetables to the small house the colonial government had given her. He knocked on her door, smiled politely, and handed her a basket of tomatoes. He was not a tall man. He was not handsome in the way the heroes in stories were handsome. He had brown hair that was starting to turn gray at the edges. His face was plain. His clothes were simple work clothes covered in dirt, but his eyes were kind. That was the first thing Lyra noticed about him. He had the kindest eyes she had ever seen. They started talking. Daniel was curious about her people and her home world. He asked questions, but not the aggressive kind that made Lyra feel like she was being interrogated. He asked because he genuinely wanted to know. He listened when she answered. He remembered what she said and asked follow-up questions days later. Lyra found herself looking forward to his visits. He came every few days to bring her fresh food from his farm. He never asked for payment. When she tried to pay him, he shook his head and said neighbors helped neighbors. That was just how things worked on New Haven. She had never experienced anything like it. In the Dominion, everything was a transaction. Every favor had to be repaid. Every kindness had a price. The idea that someone would give freely without expecting anything back was strange to her. But Daniel did it, again and again. He fixed her roof when it leaked. He taught her how to cook human food. He sat with her on her porch in the evenings and told her stories about the colony, about the families who lived there, about the small dramas and joys of rural life. Lyra fell in love with him slowly, like water wearing away stone. She did not realize it was happening until it had already happened. One morning she woke up and understood that she could not imagine her life without this quiet human farmer. She told her father through a long-distance communication channel. Admiral stared at her through the screen for a long moment. Then he laughed. He thought she was joking. When he realized she was serious, his face went cold and hard. He told her she was a disgrace. He told her she was throwing away her heritage for a primitive alien. He told her that if she married this human, she was no longer his daughter. Lyra ended the call. She went to Daniel's farm. She told him everything. Daniel listened quietly. When she finished, he took her hands in his. His hands were rough from years of farm work, but his touch was gentle. He said he loved her too. He said he had loved her for months but was afraid to say it. He was afraid she would think he was foolish. He was just a farmer after all. She was the daughter of an admiral. Lyra laughed and cried at the same time. She told him she did not care about any of that. She did not want to be an admiral's daughter anymore. She just wanted to be with him. They got married 2 months later. The ceremony was small. A local official performed it. The guests were farmers and shopkeepers from the nearby town. Lyra wore a simple white dress with flowers in her silver hair. Daniel wore his cleanest shirt and pants. It was the happiest day of Lyra's life. They settled into a routine after that. Lyra moved into Daniel's farmhouse. She learned how to help with the farm work. It was hard at first. Her muscles ached and her hands blistered, but she grew stronger. She learned how to plant seeds and pull weeds and harvest crops. Daniel was patient with her. He never got angry when she made mistakes. He simply showed her the correct way and let her try again. He praised her when she succeeded. He encouraged her when she failed. The seasons passed. Lyra learned the rhythm of life on New Haven. Spring was for planting. Summer was for tending. Fall was for harvesting. Winter was for resting and preparing for the next year. She discovered that she loved it. She loved the feel of dirt in her hands. She loved watching things grow. She loved the quiet satisfaction of a day of honest work. Most of all, she loved Daniel. She loved his patience and his kindness. She loved the way he smiled at her across the breakfast table. She loved falling asleep next to him and waking up in his arms. There were things about him she did not understand. He had a long scar on his back that she noticed when he changed clothes. When she asked about it, he said it was from a long time ago. He did not explain further, and something in his eyes told her not to push. Sometimes he woke up in the middle of the night, gasping and covered in sweat. Bad dreams, he said. Everyone had them. Lyra held him until his breathing calmed, and she did not ask what he dreamed about. There was an old trunk in the cellar that he never opened. He told her it contained family keepsakes, things from his past that he did not like to look at. Lyra respected his privacy. Everyone had parts of their past they wanted to forget. 3 years passed this way, 3 peaceful years of farming and loving and living. Lyra thought this was how the rest of her life would go. She thought she had found her forever. She had no idea that everything was about to change. She had no idea what her quiet husband really was. She had no idea that the peace she loved so much was about to be shattered. But for now, in these last quiet days before the storm, Lyra was happy. She was happier than she had ever been. And Daniel, the quiet farmer who loved her, kept his secrets locked away in the cellar, buried beneath years of peaceful living. He hoped those secrets would never have to come out. He was wrong. The day started like any other day. Lyra woke up before sunrise. She made breakfast while Daniel prepared for the morning chores. They ate together in comfortable silence, the way married couples often did. Then Daniel kissed her goodbye and walked out to the fields. Lyra washed the dishes and began her own work. She was mending clothes when she heard the sound. It was a deep rumble that shook the windows. She thought it was thunder at first, but the sky was clear and blue. She went outside to look. What she saw made her blood turn cold. Ships, dozens of ships. They filled the sky like a swarm of insects blocking out the morning sun. They were not human ships. They were not ships. They were something else entirely, something worse. Lyra recognized the design from her military training. These were ships. There were slavers and pirates from the outer rim of the galaxy. They were one of the most feared species in existence. Even the Dominion avoided conflict with them. They raided colonies for slaves. They killed anyone who resisted. They burned worlds for sport. And now they were here, above New Haven, above her home. Lyra ran back inside. Her hands were shaking. She had to find Daniel. She had to warn him. But she could already see drop ships descending from the fleet above. They would reach the ground in minutes. She grabbed a kitchen knife. It was a pathetic weapon against armored soldiers with plasma rifles, but it was all she had. She was not a warrior. She had never been trained to fight. She was a diplomat who had become a farmer's wife. The first explosions came from the direction of the town. Lyra saw smoke rising. She heard screaming in the distance. They were already moving through the colony, taking what they wanted, destroying the rest. She thought about running to Daniel, but the fields were exposed. She would be seen immediately. She would be captured or killed before she reached him. Instead, she did what Daniel had once told her to do if there was ever danger. She went to the cellar. The cellar was dark and cool. It smelled like earth and old wood. Lyra crouched behind a stack of boxes, the kitchen knife clutched in her hand. She tried to control her breathing. She tried to stop shaking. She listened to the sounds above. drop ships landing, heavy footsteps, doors being kicked in, voices shouting in a language she did not understand. They were searching the farms. They were looking for people to take, looking for things to steal, looking for resistance to crush. Lyra thought about Daniel out in the fields. He had no weapon. He was just a farmer. What could he possibly do against these monsters? She began to cry. She tried to be quiet about it, but the tears came anyway. She was going to lose him. She was going to lose this life she loved so much. It was all going to be taken away. Time passed. She did not know how long. It felt like hours. The sounds of destruction continued. The sounds of people screaming. The sounds of plasma weapons firing. Then she heard footsteps above her. Someone was in the farmhouse. She heard furniture being thrown around, glass breaking. Someone was searching the building. The cellar door opened. Lyra screamed. She raised the knife with both hands, ready to fight even though she knew she could not win. But it was not a soldier standing at the top of the stairs. It was Daniel. His clothes were torn and covered in dirt. There was a cut on his forehead that was bleeding slightly, but his face was calm. His eyes were steady. There was no fear in them at all. That was strange. That was very strange. They were attacking. People were dying, and Daniel looked as calm as he did on any ordinary morning. He walked down the stairs slowly. He looked at Lyra with those kind eyes she loved so much. "Stay here," he said. His voice was quiet and steady. "Do not come out until I return." "Daniel, you cannot fight them," Lyra said. She was still crying. Her voice was shaking. "They will kill you, please. We should hide together. We should wait until they leave." Daniel shook his head. "They will not leave," he said. "They never leave. They will take everyone on this planet as slaves or kill them trying. The only way to stop them is to make them stop." Lyra stared at him. "What are you talking about? You are one man. There are thousands of them. You have no weapons, no armor, nothing." Daniel smiled. It was not his usual smile. This smile was sad. This smile was old. This smile contained memories that Lyra had never seen before. "I was not always a farmer," he said. He walked to the old trunk in the corner of the cellar. The trunk he had never opened in all the years she had known him. The trunk, he said, contained family keepsakes from his past. He knelt down and lifted the lid. Inside the trunk was a sword. It was not a fancy weapon. There were no lights or glowing parts. It was just metal and leather. The blade was dark and worn. The handle had been wrapped in many times. It looked old. It looked ancient. But when Daniel lifted it from the trunk, something changed. Lyra felt it immediately. The air in the cellar became heavy. There was a pressure like before a storm. The hair on her arms stood up. Her heart began to beat faster without her understanding why. Daniel held the sword like he had held it 1,000 times before, like it was part of his arm, like it was part of his soul. He stood up and looked at Lyra. His eyes were different now. There was something in them that she had never seen, something old and terrible and infinitely sad. "Daniel," she whispered, "what are you? What is that sword?" He did not answer. He simply looked at her for a long moment, as if memorizing her face, as if he might never see her again. "I love you," he said. "Remember that. No matter what happens, no matter what you see, I love you." Then he turned and walked up the stairs. Lyra wanted to run after him. She wanted to grab him and pull him back to safety, but her legs would not move. The pressure in the air held her in place, or maybe it was fear, or maybe it was something else entirely. She watched her husband walk out of the cellar with an ancient sword in his hand. She watched him walk toward an army of alien slavers who had conquered dozens of worlds. She was certain she would never see him alive again. She was wrong about that. She was wrong about many things concerning Daniel Mercer. But she was about to learn the truth. The whole galaxy was about to learn the truth about what humans could become when they had no choice left but to fight. The first soldier to see Daniel walking out of the farmhouse thought it was funny. Here was a human, A small, soft, hairless creature walking toward a group of armed warriors. The human was carrying a piece of metal, not a plasma rifle, not an energy weapon, just a long piece of metal with a sharp edge. The soldier laughed. He called out to his companions in their harsh language. "Look at this foolish creature," he said. "It thinks it can fight us with a primitive blade." The other soldiers laughed too. There were 12 of them in the farmyard. They were all heavily armed. They wore body armor that could stop most projectiles and resist energy weapons. They had been conquering weaker species for their entire lives. This would be quick, they thought. This would be amusing. The first soldier raised his plasma rifle and fired. The shot was perfect. It should have burned a hole through the human's chest. Daniel moved. One moment he was standing still. The next moment he was somewhere else entirely. The plasma bolt passed through empty air and struck the barn behind him. The soldiers stopped laughing. Daniel moved again. He was among them now, the sword singing through the air. The first soldier died before he understood what was happening. The blade cut through his armor like it was cloth. His body fell in 2 pieces. The second soldier tried to aim his rifle. Daniel was faster. The sword took his head off with a single clean stroke. The third soldier screamed and fired wildly. The shots went wide. Daniel stepped inside his guard and drove the blade through his throat. 3 soldiers dead in less than 5 seconds. The remaining 9 finally understood that something was very wrong. This was not an ordinary human. This was not an ordinary fight. They spread out and opened fire together. Plasma bolts filled the air. The farmhouse wall exploded behind Daniel. The ground around him turned to glass from the heat. It was enough firepower to destroy a small vehicle. Daniel walked through it. Lyra was watching from the cellar stairs. She could see through the small window above the cellar door. What she saw made no sense. The plasma bolts hit Daniel. She saw them hit him, but he did not fall. He did not burn. He kept walking forward as if the most advanced weapons in the galaxy were nothing but a light rain. The sword in his hand was glowing now, a faint dark light that seemed to drink in the energy being thrown at it. Every shot that hit Daniel made the glow brighter. The sword was feeding. The sword was hungry. 9 soldiers became 6. 6 became 3. 3 became 1. The last soldier threw down his weapon and tried to run. Daniel let him go. He let the soldier run back toward the town, back toward the other forces. He wanted them to know. He wanted them to be afraid. More soldiers came, a lot more. They had heard the screaming. They had heard the plasma fire. They expected to find a group of human rebels that needed to be crushed. They found Daniel Mercer standing in a field of dead bodies, his sword dripping with blood, his eyes cold and empty. The officer in charge was a veteran of 30 years of raids. He had killed thousands of beings across dozens of worlds. He had never felt fear in combat. He felt it now. "What are you?" the officer demanded. His voice was not as steady as he wanted it to be. Daniel did not answer. He simply raised his sword and waited. The officer ordered his soldiers to attack. 50 warriors charged forward with blades and rifles and every weapon they had. The battle lasted 4 minutes. When it was over, Daniel was covered in blood. Some of it was his own. He had taken wounds, a cut on his arm, a burn on his leg, a deep gash across his ribs, but he was still standing. The 50 soldiers were not. Lyra had stopped crying. She had stopped feeling anything at all. What she was witnessing was beyond her understanding. Her husband, her gentle farmer husband who grew tomatoes and fixed roofs and held her when she had bad dreams, was killing an army with a sword. More came, and more. Word spread through the invading force that something was wrong in the farming district. Something was killing their soldiers. Something that could not be stopped by plasma weapons or armor or numbers. The commander of the entire invasion force, a massive named Ev, finally came to see for himself. He found Daniel standing in the town square. The square was filled with bodies. Hundreds of soldiers lay dead in the streets and buildings. The human was covered in their blood. Eth was the largest alive. He stood 3 meters tall. He had killed enemy commanders in single combat across 24 worlds. He was a legend among his own people. He looked at Daniel Mercer and felt something he had not felt in decades. He felt doubt. "What are you?" Eth asked. Daniel finally spoke. His voice was quiet. His voice was tired. But his words carried across the silent square, and everyone who heard them would remember them for the rest of their lives. "I am what your kind made me," Daniel said. "I am what war makes of all men in the end." He raised the ancient sword. "I am the last knight of old Earth, and you have made a terrible mistake coming here." Eth roared and charged forward. He was fast for his size. He had killed hundreds of beings with his bare hands. He thought his strength and speed would be enough. They were not enough. Daniel moved like water. He moved like wind. He moved like death itself given human form. His sword cut through Eth's armor. It cut through his flesh. It cut through his bones. The great commander of the fell to his knees. He looked down at his body and saw that he had been cut nearly in half. He looked up at the human standing before him. "How?" Eth whispered. "How is this possible?" Daniel looked at him with those cold, empty eyes. "Humans are not weak," Daniel said. "We simply choose not to be strong. Because when we are strong, when we let ourselves become what we can become, we destroy everything around us, even ourselves." He raised the sword one final time. "You should have left this world alone," Daniel said. "You should have left us in peace." The blade fell. The commander of the invasion died on a quiet farming world, killed by a man who just wanted to grow vegetables. The remaining soldiers saw their leader fall. They saw the human standing over his body. They saw the sword that had killed hundreds of their brothers. And they ran. They ran to their ships. They ran to the sky. They ran away from New Haven as fast as their vessels could carry them. Daniel let them go. He had killed enough. He had become what he never wanted to be again. The sword in his hand was heavy now, heavier than it had ever been. He dropped the blade. It fell to the ground with a sound like a funeral bell. Then he fell to his knees and began to weep. Lyra ran to him. She ran through the streets filled with bodies. She ran past the destroyed buildings and the burning vehicles. She ran until she reached her husband. She held him while he cried. She held him while his body shook with sobs. She held him and did not let go. The battle was over. The invasion had been stopped, but something else had ended too. The quiet life they had built together, the peace they had found, the man Daniel had tried to become. All of it was gone now. All of it had been burned away in a single day of violence. And Lyra did not know if they could ever get it back. The surviving did not just run away. They regrouped in orbit around New Haven. Their commanders held an emergency meeting. Their greatest leader was dead. Hundreds of warriors had been killed, all by a single human with a primitive weapon. They decided they could not leave. If word spread that they had been defeated by one man, their reputation would be destroyed. Other species would stop fearing them. Their entire way of life depended on fear. They had to win. They had to destroy this human and everyone on this planet. They had to make an example. So they called for reinforcements. Every ship in the sector, every warrior they could gather. Within hours, a fleet of 60 vessels surrounded New Haven. 3,000 soldiers prepared to land. They would burn the entire colony to the ground. They would find this human who had killed their commander and tear him apart piece by piece. They would show the galaxy what happened to those who Daniel knew they would come back. He had fought them before, long ago, in the wars that had turned him into what he was. He knew they could not accept defeat. He knew they would return with everything they had. He told Lyra to gather the surviving colonists. He told her to take them to the emergency shelters in the hills outside of town. The shelters were built deep underground. They would survive even orbital bombardment. Lyra did not want to leave him. She held onto his arm and begged him to come with her. They could hide together. They could wait until help arrived. Someone must have sent a distress signal. Someone must be coming. Daniel shook his head. Help would take days to arrive, he said. That would destroy everything long before then. Someone had to slow them down. Someone had to give the colonists time to reach safety. But you cannot fight 3,000 soldiers, Lyra said. Even you cannot do that. You will die. Daniel looked at her. His eyes were sad but determined. Maybe, he said, probably. But if I do not try, everyone here will die. Everyone I have come to know and love. The farmers who welcomed me. The children who play in the streets. You. He touched her face gently. I have been running from what I am for 15 years, he said. I came here to forget. I planted crops and built fences because I wanted to be something other than a weapon. But I cannot run anymore. I cannot pretend anymore. This is what I was made for. This is what I have to do. Lyra was crying. She had cried so much in the last few hours that her eyes burned. I do not want to lose you, she said. I cannot lose you. Daniel pulled her close and held her. He held her for a long moment, memorizing the feel of her in his arms. You saved me, he whispered. You showed me that there was more to life than fighting and killing. You gave me 3 years of peace, 3 years of happiness. That is more than I ever expected to have. He stepped back and looked at her. Now go, he said. Take the colonists to safety. Keep them alive until help comes. Lyra wanted to argue. She wanted to refuse. But she looked into his eyes and saw that his decision was made. Nothing she said would change it. She kissed him. One long, desperate kiss that said everything words could not. Then she turned and ran to gather the colonists. Daniel watched her go. He watched until she disappeared from sight. Then he picked up his sword and walked to the center of the colony. The drop ships began landing an hour later. They came in waves, hundreds of soldiers at a time, spreading out across the colony, searching for targets. They found Daniel waiting for them. The battle that followed would become legend. Storytellers would tell it for generations. They would say it could not have happened. They would say it must be exaggerated. But the survivors knew the truth. They had seen it with their own eyes. Daniel Mercer fought for 7 hours. He fought without rest. He fought without stopping. He fought with a fury that made the warriors believe they were facing a demon from their old myths. The sword in his hand sang through the air. It cut through armor. It cut through shields. It cut through the hull plating of drop ships that landed too close to him. Nothing could stand against it. They tried everything. They attacked in groups. They attacked alone. They used heavy weapons. They used vehicles. They called in orbital strikes that turned entire blocks of the colony to rubble. Daniel survived it all. He was wounded many times. Blood soaked his clothes. His left arm hung limp at his side after a particularly savage blow. A plasma burn had half his face. But he kept fighting. He kept killing. The bodies piled up around him. Hundreds became 1,000. 1,000 became 2,000. The streets ran with blood. The commanders watched from their ships in orbit. They could not believe what they were seeing. This was not possible. No single being could do this. No single being could stand against an army and win. But the human was winning. Their soldiers were dying. Their morale was breaking. They ordered their remaining forces to attack all at once. Every soldier they had left. Nearly 1,000 warriors charging toward one man. Daniel stood in the ruins of the colony he had called home. He was exhausted. He was wounded. He could barely lift his sword. But he lifted it anyway. The final charge of the lasted 12 minutes. When it was over, Daniel was the only one standing. 3,000 soldiers dead. Daniel fell to his knees. The sword slipped from his fingers. He had nothing left. No strength. No will. Nothing but pain and exhaustion and the weight of everything he had done. Lyra found him there an hour later. She had heard the silence when the fighting stopped. She had come back, unable to stay away, needing to know if he was alive or dead. He was alive, barely. His body was broken in a dozen places. His blood mixed with the blood of his enemies on the ruined ground. But he was breathing. He was alive. Lyra called for help. The colonists who had hidden in the shelters came out. They saw what Daniel had done. They saw the field of bodies. They saw the man who had saved them all. They carried him to the only medical facility still standing. They worked through the night to save his life. It took 3 days for Daniel to wake up. When he opened his eyes, Lyra was there, holding his hand, tears streaming down her face. "You did it," she said. "You saved us. You saved everyone." Daniel looked at her. His eyes were hollow, empty. "No," he said. His voice was barely a whisper. "I did not save anyone. I just killed a lot of people. That is all I know how to do." Lyra squeezed his hand. "That is not true," she said. "You know how to love. You know how to be kind. You know how to grow things and fix things and make people feel safe. That is who you are. That is who you will always be." Daniel closed his eyes. A single tear ran down his face. "I wanted to forget," he said. "I wanted to be someone else." "I know," Lyra said, "and you will be. When this is over, you will go back to being a farmer. We will rebuild our home. We will plant new crops. We will have the life we wanted." She leaned close and kissed his forehead. "But right now," she said, "you need to rest. You need to heal. And you need to know that what you did was not wrong. It was terrible and it was bloody, but it was not wrong. You saved innocent people. You stopped monsters from taking everything we love." Daniel did not answer. He just lay there holding her hand, trying to believe that what she said was true. The galaxy was about to change. News of New Haven was already spreading. The had been defeated. 3,000 of their best warriors killed by a single human. Everyone would want to know how. Everyone would want to know who. The quiet life Daniel had fought so hard to protect was already slipping away. But for now, in the quiet of the medical room, he held his wife's hand and allowed himself to hope that somehow, some way, they could find their peace again. The news spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. A single human had stopped the invasion, 3,000 warriors killed, an entire fleet sent running, all by one man with an ancient sword. Every species in the Galactic Council wanted to know more. How was this possible? What technology had the humans used? What secrets were they hiding? The survivors told their story to anyone who would listen. They spoke of a demon in human form. They spoke of a blade that drank energy and could not be stopped by any weapon. They spoke of a man who walked through plasma fire like it was morning mist. Some believed, some did not, but no one could deny the evidence. The bodies, the destroyed ships, the recordings from military sensors that showed a single figure cutting through an army. Humans had always been considered a young and weak species. That changed overnight. Now everyone looked at humans differently. Now everyone wondered what other secrets they might be hiding. The human government sent representatives to New Haven, scientists and military officers and diplomats. They wanted to study Daniel. They wanted to understand how he had done what he did. They wanted to recruit him. Daniel refused to see them. He was still recovering from his injuries. His body was healing, but his mind was not. He spent hours staring at nothing. He barely spoke. The gentleness that Lyra had loved was buried under layers of guilt and grief. Lyra stayed by his side. She talked to him even when he did not respond. She held his hand. She reminded him of the good times they had shared before the invasion. She refused to give up on him. Slowly, very slowly, Daniel began to come back. One morning, about a month after the battle, he spoke without being prompted. He asked Lyra if the tomato plants had survived. Lyra laughed and cried at the same time. It was the first normal thing he had said since the fighting ended. She told him most of the plants had been destroyed, but some seeds could be saved. They could start again. Daniel nodded. He said he would like that. The representatives kept coming. They sent messages and requests and eventually demands. The human military wanted Daniel. They said he was too valuable to waste on a farming colony. They said he had a duty to his species. Daniel finally agreed to speak with them. He met with a group of admirals and generals in the rebuilt town hall. Lyra stood beside him, her hand in his. The highest-ranking admiral spoke first. She talked about duty and honor and the need to protect humanity. She said Daniel could train other soldiers. He could lead armies. He could make humans the most feared species in the galaxy. Daniel listened without expression. When the admiral finished, he spoke one word. No. The military leaders were shocked. They argued, they threatened, they tried to bargain. Daniel did not change his answer. I have spent my life fighting, he said. I was a soldier when I was still a child. I killed my first enemy before I was old enough to vote. I fought in wars that destroyed nations. I watched everyone I cared about die. He looked at Lyra. When those wars finally ended, I promised myself I would never fight again. I came to this colony to find peace. I found it. I found a wife. I found a home. I found a reason to live that did not involve killing. He turned back to the admirals. I broke my promise to save this colony. I became what I never wanted to be again. I will live with that for the rest of my life, but I will not do it again. I will not become your weapon. I will not train your soldiers. I am done. The admirals threatened to force him. They said they could arrest him. They said they could take him against his will. Daniel smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. You could try, he said, but you know how that would end. You saw the recordings. You know what I can do. The admirals went silent. They knew he was right. They could not force him to do anything. No one could. They left New Haven empty-handed. Other visitors came after them. Scientists who wanted to study his abilities. Journalists who wanted to tell his story. Politicians who wanted to use his fame. Daniel refused them all. Only one visitor made it through. Admiral, Lyra's father, arrived on a diplomatic vessel 6 weeks after the battle. Lyra had not spoken to her father in over 3 years. Not since he disowned her for marrying a human. She did not want to see him now. But the admiral was not the same man who had rejected her. Something had changed. He looked older, smaller somehow. He asked to speak with Daniel. Lyra said no. Daniel said yes. They met in the farmhouse that was slowly being rebuilt, sat across from Daniel and looked at him with new eyes. Not the contempt he had shown before. Something else. Something like respect, or maybe fear. How did you do it? Asked. How did one human defeat an army that would have destroyed a battle fleet? Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he told the admiral the truth. Earth almost destroyed itself, Daniel said. We fought each other with every weapon we could create. Nuclear bombs, biological weapons, machines designed only to kill. We came so close to extinction that the survivors had to change or die. He held up his hand and looked at it. They changed us, enhanced us, made us into something that could survive anything, could fight anything, could kill anything. He lowered his hand. There were hundreds of us at first. The Knights of Old Earth, they called us. We were supposed to end the wars and save humanity. Instead, we just became better at killing. We fought each other. We fought everyone. Most of us died. The few who survived were scattered across the galaxy, trying to forget what we were. He looked at with those sad, tired eyes. I am the last one, Daniel said. The last knight. The last weapon from a war that almost ended my species. That is how I defeated not through courage or skill, through the same violence that nearly destroyed everything I love. Was silent for a long time. Then he did something unexpected. He apologized. "I was wrong about you," said. "I was wrong about humans. I thought you were weak because you chose peace. I did not understand that you chose peace because you knew what you could become if you did not." He looked toward the door where Lyra was waiting. "Take care of my daughter," said. "She chose well when she chose you." Then he left. Life on New Haven slowly returned to normal. The colony was rebuilt. New families arrived to replace those lost in the invasion. The fields were planted again. The seasons continued their endless cycle. Daniel and Lyra rebuilt their farmhouse. They planted new crops. They lived their quiet lives together, just as they had before. A year after the battle, Lyra told Daniel she was pregnant. They held each other and laughed and cried with joy. They had twins, a boy and a girl. The children had their mother's silver hair and their father's kind eyes. They grew up on the farm, learning to plant and harvest and care for animals. Daniel never taught them to fight. He hoped he would never have to. But every night, after the children were in bed and the house was quiet, Daniel would look toward the cellar. The old trunk was still there. The sword was still inside it. Not as a threat, not as a burden, but as a promise. Daniel Mercer had found his peace again. He had become the farmer he wanted to be. He had a wife who loved him and children who adored him. He had friends and neighbors and a community that called him one of their own. But he knew the galaxy was watching now. He knew there were others out there who might one day come to take what he loved. And if they did, if anyone ever threatened his family or his home again, he would pick up that sword one more time. He hoped that day would never come. But if it did, the galaxy would learn what humans were truly capable of. They would learn why even the greatest empires should fear the quiet ones. They would learn why you should never threaten a human who has found something worth protecting. And they would tremble. The end.